Welcome back, and today we're flying out the F-18C late for both the American as well as the Swedish tech tree, because they are pretty similar and I just wanted to quickly overview what the differences are. On the overall overview, the F-18s are pretty simple to fly. They aren't easy to fly, they aren't the best plane in the game, but they're also not completely terrible. The main thing is going to be, of course, the 10 MRAMs that you will be able to strap under your wings. Now, you can also opt to run more AIM-9Ms, but personally, I'm more of a fan of just the MRAMs because they are a lot more consistent, and overall, you want to be able to keep people at range. You don't really want to get into dogfights, and while the AOA of this thing is absolutely obscene and you will be able to pull into essentially every shot that you need to, it will also kill all of your speed instantly, and you don't have much speed to begin with. The F-18s are relatively slow planes, and you have to play them with this in mind. If you only play the American side, this is going to be a bit of a wake-up call for you. If you are used to other nations, you might be familiar with this kind of playstyle where you kind of let people come to you. You're not an F-15E, you're not an F-16C, and you're not able to just kind of go in, go Mach 1.5, ripple off some missiles, do a split S, and be completely untouchable. With this plane, you need to get into the no escape zone of the enemy plane, and this can be a little bit daunting, and it is a little bit frustrating if you aren't familiar with this, but it doesn't mean that the plane is completely helpless. Now, if the enemy is playing it absolutely perfect, yeah, you're probably never going to be touching them because you just can't ever touch them, but in the average lobby, this is more than sufficient in terms of flight performance. It accelerates well, it maneuvers pretty decently. Just keep in mind that the sustained dogfighting capability essentially isn't there. And again, the speed bleed is going to be very, very apparent. Now, the speed bleed also has a little bit of a benefit. It makes it a lot easier to stay in the notch window. If you're going like 500, it's much easier to turn out and just kind of fool the missile almost instantly, opposed to going Mach 1.4 where the notch window is almost like 1 or 2 degrees at the very most. So it's actually relatively easy. Now, the MRAMs don't really complement this plane. You still don't have the range. I think that something like a PL-12 or perhaps even a Mika would have done very well on this plane, because you're kind of able to whip your nose around, do a high off-board shot, and you have to let them come to you anyway. So I think it would be a nice thing. The MRAM doesn't really complement this plane. Now, something like an A120C, it's of course the other way around, because then we get a missile with a lot of range and it doesn't need to inherit the energy of the plane anymore. Now, no, I don't think that it should get these missiles. It's definitely much too early for that. Now, here you can see me go defensive. I just go slow and I'm able to basically defeat all of these missiles. Just keep in mind, I'm not able to really re-engage because, well, at close range, an A120 is not going to be able to pull in like it did on launch, for example. So you need to whip the nose around a little bit further. And this is where the differences between the F-18C for the American and the Swedish tech tree come into play the most. The Swedish one has a ever so slightly better flight model, and I did find it noticeable, but it might also just be placebo. It's a little bit lighter, it maneuvers a bit better, it accelerates a bit better, it feels a little bit quicker. Overall, it feels better in my opinion. It is better in the stats, but it might also be that I just got slightly better games while I was playing that one, and I was more conscious of it. So take it with a grain of salt, but it is ever so slightly better. However, you do lose the HMD, which is a bit of a big thing, because you already don't want to whip the nose around all the way at medium to longer ranges, because guess what, you're gonna be losing even more speed. Now, these engagements would have been completely possible with the Swedish one, and at super close range the HMD doesn't really matter all too much, because your missiles aren't going to be able to pull in anyway. It's the same thing with the AIM-9Ms. They're not super great at like sub 1 kilometer launches if you're in a turn. It's not an R73, it's not a PL8, it's not a Magic 2. It's an AIM-9M. And it still has the same maneuverability as you will find on something like an AIM-9G, which you will find all the way at 9.7. So overall the heat seekers aren't too great, but keep in mind the IRCCM mode where it turns off the seeker, tracking suspension, is just very, very good, especially if you're shooting them from the top. And if you're playing it in simulator, the lack of smoke trail is gonna also be a massive benefit. What are we doing here? We are again going super slow, we're getting engaged by the entire enemy team, and I'm just trying to get as many missiles off as I humanly can. Go head on with the Eurofighter, have the worst aim I've ever had, and we missed him in the head on. Now we can merge here, we can do the first turn with one circle, we are able to turn in first. A9M doesn't have the ability to pull in there because the Eurofighter is going slightly too fast. And here I get on the 6, and I know that if I stamp on the elevator with the Cobra button, I will be able to pull in. That's exactly what we do. We barely line up the shot. I think I could have been able to aim 9M him, but I see the missile coming in and he is going to be going down. In the long run, that Eurofighter shits all over me in the raid. So I wanted to finish that as quickly as I can. That way I might be able to get a shot and kill him instantly. Now if I miss that, I probably die. The thing is, if I don't do that in the long run, I also just die. The F-18 has no chance against most planes in a dogfight if it's an equal player. So be careful with it. It's about on the same level as something like an F-16C, I believe. It's slightly worse than it. It just doesn't have the energy to really keep up. Now, again, it's not terrible. And in the Arabi matchup where you kind of dive on someone or you jump someone, it's more than enough because you're always able to get the nose on. And because it bleeds so much speed, you are basically always going to get the position first, and they are gonna have to work decently hard to get you off them. And if they don't know exactly what to do, there's a very big chance that you will just absolutely slam them on the spot. Now, how do we play this thing? I prefer to play it just under contrail level. I'm trying to not get spotted, and I kind of wait behind my team lines if I can. Now, in a game like this, where the entire team is spread out and everywhere and nowhere basically, this kind of becomes harder to do, and you just have to look around and see if you can find opportunistic targets. You don't want to get into the entire furball. You definitely don't want to get into like a 1v3 in this thing, because there is just no way you're gonna come out of it unless the enemy makes some absolutely horrendous mistakes. So I'm trying to play it somewhat slow, about as slow as this plane actually is, and I'm gonna wait for people to come towards me. So here you can see I'm keeping them at arm's length. I'm going to be notching their missiles, I'm going to be counter-launching, and I am able to just kind of ripple them off as much as I want, considering I have so many of them. So here we shoot a missile on the Su-30 as well as the guy on the bottom. Su-30 is going to be eating that directly on the forehead, and the J-10 on the bottom here is going to be dodging it for now. So what do? We dive out and we try to get away from that horde of F-18s that's coming in. And I should be able to get away from some of these missiles because I have the distance to do so. But considering they're much quicker than me, they are going to be catching me, and I need to start turning in order to actually notch the next missile, because I will not be able to actually outrun. The Swedish one is very similar. We of course don't have an HMD, but it doesn't really matter considering at super close range we aren't really able to launch the missiles off anyway, because the A120 arc is pretty sizable. It's about the same circumference as the orbit around your model. So we just want to get a little bit closer with the nose, and that way you don't really need to have an HMD. Now you will be able to use the ACM mode, and personally I use the ACM mode very often in the Talbox mode, where you kind of switch the mode and it turns into the one you have in the Russian tech tree as well by standard, the one where it's kind of a vertical scan. And this makes it so that you can lock onto them a little bit easier when you are turning in. Now you can also fuck with the tilt controls in your radar, but I find this much too finicky, and I'm very lazy, so I'm not really a fan of that. But you can do that if you so desire. We get a missile shot at us, and this time we are able to, the same time as last clip, we are able to run away and just kind of go cold. But you do want to be careful, because if you misjudge that, you are much safer off just trying to notch it, considering you're not that quick anyway. And notching is just a lot more reliable in this thing than trying to outrun the missile. You're basically always in the enemy escape zone or no escape zone if they are launching at you. And this is not a guarantee that your missile will be able to reach them if they turn around. So be a little bit careful, but at the same time you don't have to worry about it too much, considering you simply have so many missiles to begin with. Here we kind of come back in after shooting 2 missiles off. I try to arc the A120 over the mountain, but he actually multi-pads it correctly, and it ends up hitting the ground. MiG-29 goes back down in the background, and we just kind of leave for now. F-18 is going super slow. I'm not going to be turning into him right there, because he is going to be able to get a shot off. I have a teammate around, so I'm just going to be disengaging, using the terrain, and then we turn back around. Now, before we even get to him, the game is essentially over. If I don't kill him, the Eurofighter will. He's super slow. He's in a 2v1, we are actually pinchering him. I'm now shooting another A120 at him in the head-on. He needs to multipad, and because of that multipad attempt, he needs to dive away from the Eurofighter and gives him a very clear shot. For the next game, it's going to be a little bit more of an average one, where we kind of just actually are able to sit behind our team and wait for the enemy to come to us. Now this time around, I am barely in contrail altitude and we are at about 5.5 kilometers. Shoot the first missile over the guy at altitude, and then I want to start helping out the guys that are on the deck. Now that A120 is going to hit him 100% of the time. We shot it at about 12 kilometers at high altitude. He is never going to be dodging that by going cold or simply just turning. He needs to notch that. And he just flew straight into it and ignored it altogether. And the Su-30 really should not be getting that close to begin with, because any of these guys directly below him could have just pitched up and shot him out of the air. A little bit of a misplay by him. And we are now able to kind of uncontestedly, that's not a word, but you know what I mean, sit above my team and rain down missiles on top of them. For now, I'm just kind of looking around, seeing if I can find anyone. And I can't, because there's clouds everywhere, so I'm starting to look for contrails again. And again, we don't have an HMD, but we do have an RWR, and we see an F-15 directly in front of us. Now we switch to TWS, we need a little bit more range, and I notice that he's about 25 kilometers away, and that is just too far to shoot. But I'm still going to be shooting to give him something to think about, and then we're going to switch on over to the people on the deck. Now the reason I shoot that missile at the probably F-15 at high alt is just to force him to not be able to pressure us. He needs to turn around now, and this buys us a little bit of room to clean up on the deck. Now we probably notched it, and he is coming back in now, so we're going to shoot a second missile and push him away yet again. Now this doesn't really hinder him all too much, because he is able to notch these missiles, but if he doesn't play it perfectly, and he isn't careful enough, he's going to end up headbutting that missile right on the forehead, and that's exactly what he does. So now we cleared up the high altitude, and we can start transitioning to all the people on the deck again. We get a severe counter skill thingy, F-15 goes down, and we are above the clouds. We are able to go a little bit lower. I do recommend to stay at about 4.5 to 5 kilometers anyway, because it makes you a little bit less likely to get picked up by a random spotter. But without the HMD and just using the ACM mode, it's a little bit more annoying to really get close to them and lock them up properly. Or lock them up properly without getting closer, so I opt to just be a little bit more aggressive and basically dive straight in. And just like that, we have cleaned up basically the entire map. We get another critical hit, we lock him with the AIM-9, but he burns up before he hits the ground. And that is going to be a very quick succession of kills. And there is just one guy left, and it's a Eurofighter. He just took off, and we are coming over the mountain here and just kind of jump him. Now at this point, I thought I kind of want to get a dogfight, so I lock him up. I don't instantly fire. I just kind of shoot it short, and if he doesn't dodge it, it's because he doesn't pay attention. And if he does turn at all, then I get to have a little bit of a dogfight. So if you're wondering, why did you merge so improperly, or why did you have such a terrible opener, it's because I wanted to dogfight this guy. I could shoot another AIM-9M here, but I'm trying to get a dogfight. We go underneath him, we are slowing down a little bit, because I do want to make sure that he doesn't just instantly reverse us. And he presses the goddamn Cobra button. Now he loses all of his speed instantly. He's at this point hanging in place. And I almost turn back in front of him here, but I'm just gonna press the Cobra button off myself. We almost get underneath him with the nose. Not able to get the nose on target. But we're now both going 200 kilometers an hour essentially. And then this plane isn't all that bad. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.